Hey everyone, welcome back to Rituals Jiu-Jitsu podcast. I have a very special guest today, Eric Uresk, who's an old teammate and training partner of mine from Phuket Top Team. We trained together about 10 years ago. After that, Eric really kind of took over the scene in Thailand, being the head coach of Phuket Top Team for 5 years. He also went on to coach guys like Dominic Cruz, and it was the Arena, correct? Is the name of the gym?
Alliance MMA.
Alliance MMA, I'm sorry. Alliance MMA in San Diego. And he's recently kind of made some changes in the last couple of years, moving into just kind of like personal coaching and mentoring. Uh, Eric's got an amazing mindset, and something I really kind of want to tap in with everyone today. It's something I've benefited from and had friends benefit from as well. And I just really want to welcome him to the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me here, man.
Yeah.
Stoked that we got to make the time.
Yeah, man, it's cool to connect again. And like I said, me and Eric got an opportunity to train together a little bit about 10 years ago, and I saw how tough he was on the mat, and kind of like he had this really commanding presence that he just kind of brought to the room right away. And back in the day in Thailand, it was kind of, it was just kind of starting out, people traveling to train in like third world countries and stuff like that in Southeast Asia. It was really just kind of becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And those rooms back then were crazy. They were really intense rooms, and there's this real like battle for pecking order and kind of establishing your dominance and all this sort of stuff that kind of happened on a weekly basis back then.
Yeah. It was an interesting time. It was cool. It was just me getting there and having so many tough guys in the room and still being a fighter myself at the time. Yeah, just wanting to establish that my spot in the room. And some of it's unconscious and some of it's conscious, and
Of course.
the chips fall where they may, and just ended up everybody just started following. I came in with a structure of training that I was committed to. There was a standard that I had received from my pedigree of coaching, and I just started doing what I do, and guys followed along, and then just somehow kind of became, before I was actually officially titled the head coach, just people were following my lead.
It's true. I think that even seeing you come in at that time, like I was kind of transitioning out to Bali already at that time, but it was just the presence you brought into the room. It's like you commanded attention, and you commanded like a certain level of like people just were drawn to you, what you were doing, and you had the skills to back it up, and in an approach that you could see already was kind of you knew it worked. Like you had tested your systems enough, and it was good and where it was supposed to be. So it seemed like probably that was just a very natural progression for you to kind of start moving in and taking over that program.
Yeah, well, I think coming out of Alliance MMA, at the time that I had left there, in some of the lists, we were like top 3 or 4 teams in the world at the time. And I'd been in a room with numerous world champions, and come from one of the best coaches in the game. Eric Del Fiero was a big mentor of mine and my coach through my career. And I've also trained under Sean Tompkins periods of time, who was at one time one of the better coaches in the game. So I've always had really solid coaching and come from structures and formulas that I saw work at the highest level.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about like your experience working with world champions, because I think just being in a room with a world champion kind of brings something really special to the room. You know what I mean? And I think it impacts people's training more than they think.
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing for me to notice now is that there's so many different ways to be a world champion.
Right.
There really isn't a cookie cutter like this is what champions do. If I had to pick the characteristic that stands out the most is obsession. Right? So out of all the different formulas that I've seen, obsession seems to be the number one sort of factor that I see in all of them. The commonality that I see in all these guys is there's a particular obsession. There's a willingness to test. There's an expectation of being the best. And it's interesting because I noticed like the weakness in my mindset was I had the obsession. What I didn't have was the willingness to challenge the vulnerabilities in my ego specifically, to turn those into strengths, right? Whereas a lot of these guys, in my experience, do have that. A lot of the champions do have that. Not all of them, but a lot of them do have that willingness to go where they're scared,
Right.
right? Until they're not scared anymore.
Right. Yeah, and it takes a special sort of person to kind of surrender to that, right?
Yeah.
So what were some of those weaknesses that you felt that you were like afraid to kind of confront
So
that you
yeah.
came to
So for
later?
me, I was like one of those guys that would win every round in practice, just about.
Yeah,
Right. And if I couldn't win a round in practice, it would destroy me mentally for well, until I won again.
right. Yeah,
Right. So there's the first mistake. Right. I think looking at practice as a place to prove yourself. I think what happened for me is I had a lot of fights get canceled over and over and over again, like 7 years of camps, I think, complete where fights fell through like at the very end.
yeah,
It's just a lot of time. Happened for like a couple of times for like 2-3 years at a time. So that's a lot of time to lose. So I felt like when I wasn't competing as regularly, the training room turned into my competition because I wasn't getting to get it out
right.
where it actually meant something. I think also I was risk averse, extremely risk averse. So I needed to keep things in a control where I felt calm and in control. I was unwilling at that time to embrace chaos, and I didn't have anybody pointing any of this out to me. I had you know, Dominic Cruz pointing out that I was avoiding my vulnerabilities,
Yeah,
but he didn't. I just at the time, right? I just felt I didn't like how it felt. Like I felt attacked instead of supported, and so I just avoided it altogether. Like
was Dominic more of a training partner or was he a coach to you?
Dominic was a training partner at the time.
Yeah, I think that's probably harder coming from
Yeah,
a training partner
yeah.
too. Even sometimes like we, I think as we mature in combat sports, we learn to be more receptive to what our training partners are sharing with us. But that's almost information that you need to receive
Yeah.
from your coach. You know?
Yeah, and even still, I think at that time I had a really hard time receiving feedback
Yeah.
that wasn't positive.
Right.
I think I was so attention starved for positive feedback I couldn't accept negative feedback
Right.
at the time. Perhaps I don't know. I never really had it delivered in a way that was palatable.
Yeah.
And yeah, I managed to I was actually pretty slow. When I look back at it now, I'm like, oh, you sneaky little fuck. Like, you really insulated yourself from a lot of criticism because I was such a value to the team
Yeah.
and kind of coaching while being a fighter.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, it's weird. I kind of slid myself in this like sneaky little place.
Maybe it was like a balancing act where it
Yeah.
kind of kept you in it, but it didn't let you grow to your full potential, right? Like even myself, I think I've gone through periods where I struggle receiving criticism, and like learning to accept that criticism constructively is difficult for a lot of people. Is there anything you do now to make that kind of more digestible for yourself?
Yeah, 100%. So one of the things that I really focus on now, and I learned this by observing myself doing the opposite. So I was not too long ago, actually, I was sitting in a room for a leadership training, right? And so I'm a coach amongst a bunch of other coaches, and we're giving a training, but we're being led by a lead trainer, right?
Right.
Some of these lead trainers, they're like fucking Jedis, right?
Yeah.
These guys have 4 decades deep of knowledge in leadership, like active practical stuff,
Right.
And so we're being asked questions, me and like I would say colleagues, and I caught a glimpse of myself wanting to prove to the trainer what I know, as opposed to, so that was my focus. My focus was how can I give the best answer, better
Right.
than how can I stand out from everybody here.
Yeah.
Okay, instead of what could I be like, how can I learn the most out of being in the presence of this person right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are 2 completely different come froms.
Yes.
And I think this translates perfectly. There's wanting to prove yourself, and then there's wanting to improve. Okay? So wanting to prove myself is purely about me.
That's coming from ego.
Yeah. Wanting to improve, okay? I mean, it could also be about ego, but it's also, for me now, at this point in my life, it's like the more I improve, the more I can serve.
Yes.
Okay? The deeper my capacity to serve. And so I caught a glimpse of myself in that moment, and it was one of those moments where, I don't know if you've ever seen yourself in an unflattering light, like doing something that's perhaps cringy,
Yeah.
only because the way that I see it in that moment is so crystal clear. And it was so clear and so cringy. And I said, man, like, look at all the time I've wasted trying to prove my worth to people as opposed to taking opportunities to learn from people.
Right.
You know, and it's and I just saw all the ways that I do that, and so it's like it's been cool. I've noticed because what ultimately happens when that's my come from, and when that's where I'm coming from constantly, a couple different things happen. If I'm always looking to steal the spotlight in the room, right, I'm not giving other people opportunities to shine, and that's not being a leader.
Right.
Right, being a leader is a service position.
Right.
I believe. I used to think it was about the leader was the guy at the top that everybody did everything for.
Right.
Right. That's from like my time in like as a kid in the street up until a couple of years ago. You know.
Yeah.
Like I would always find myself in leadership positions, and I would benefit people enough that they'd put up with my my self-centeredness, but it limited my capacity to lead, to serve, to actually help people grow.
That makes a lot of sense. And you got to think, I also think this is very true. It's an unfortunate part of the martial art community. Sometimes just because you're the best in the room, people turn to you as if you're the leader just based on your ability.
That happens.
They don't look at your actions, your behavior around how you're actually helping the whole team grow. That's something I think we mature into in the room, which is a common thing as we transition from, this is, I think, more common where it's somebody transitioning from athlete to coach, which is usually the progression, But yeah, I think that's an important transition that people kind of go through. And then I think once you're there, it helps quite a bit,
Yeah, I've definitely seen the best guys in the room become leader by default. And I don't always have good leadership skills. And then I've also seen guys that are great, technically great, skilled, gifted, and have leadership skills to bring people together.
Yes.
And I think it can look a couple of different ways. I've seen leaders in the room that lead.
Yeah.
And I've seen leaders in the room that don't necessarily lead.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag, and I think the more I learn and experience and grow into my capacity to lead, the more I see like all the things that I've misstepped in the past.
Right.
Right.
100%.
So the fact that people would naturally sort of gravitate towards me for whatever reasons they found to do that does not mean I was actually being a good leader.
Right.
Dude, there's people that have charisma that get people to fucking drink punch and kill themselves.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
yeah.
it's...
So what I'm finding now for myself, like this is something I heard a while ago. A good leader is a compass. I'm just supposed to point you in the right direction and kind of help you along the pitfalls along the way. And that's something I'm really trying to embody a bit more in my role as a coach. Because I don't always have all the answers, but what I can do is share my experience with you. And like that's really all, like I've done jiu-jitsu for 18 years, you know what I mean? And that's longer than a lot of people have done it and stick with it, you know what I mean? So at least if there's any sort of problem that you're kind of experiencing along the way, I can share that with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way that I can serve. And like, again, this is important for me also because I know like one of my shortcomings is I can be self-righteous sometimes. So for me, kind of making sure that I don't then go into that thing where I'm still trying to prove myself to you. I shouldn't have to do that. You know what I mean? My job is just to kind of share my experience and help you along the way and hopefully still inspire you.
That's really important what you just said.
Yeah.
I remember there were times, particularly in my MMA coaching career, where I would get high profile athletes coming into the gym and I would find myself trying to prove my value to them.
Yes.
Right. And that's never a place I want to find myself coming from.
Right.
Okay. And it was coming from a scarcity mindset. Right. It was really, I was trying to get them. Of course, I was going to deliver as a coach. Like I knew full well that my capacity as a coach would benefit them. Right. But I was looking to get something. Okay. So that's really important. And I think, I have a very clear and confident in my vision of things most of the time. Okay. And I think it's that confidence and that clearness, that clarity, that is actually what draws people in.
Right.
I think if a person isn't clear, they're going to be uneasy.
Yeah.
Okay. Because their energy is not directed.
Yes.
Okay. So when you can provide clarity, a clear way forward, now we have a way to direct our energy in a way that feels meaningful.
Yes.
Okay. So once you can add clarity, you can add directing energy in a way that's meaningful. Man, you take a lot, like that's attractive to somebody that's not clear and not feeling fully meaningful in how they're spending their energy.
Yes.
So once I can do, okay, so that's the first part.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I don't know what I used to think I knew what was best for you. And so let me tell you how to get to where I think you should be going.
Right.
Okay. That's not a collaborative process. Okay? What I try to exist in now is a bit more of a collaborative process, or a lot more of a collaborative process, where tell me what you want. Let's get clear on what you want, not what I want for
Yeah.
you. All right? I'll share. I might share with what I want for you, but I'm going to make that distinction. Okay. Once I make that distinction, but you don't have to do that. It's ultimately, what do you want? Do you need my support in getting clear on what you want? Now, once we're clear on what you want based on what you actually want, all I am there from that point on is a mirror,
Yes.
right? I get to reflect back to you what I'm seeing, where I think you are in conjunction with where you're trying to go. And if you trust me and my vision in that context, then we can do work together.
Right.
And that's it. Once I start thinking I know what's best for a person,
Yeah.
which I can fall into very easy, I have to snap myself out of it.
Right.
Man, we could be heading for some shaky ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because I use a similar analogy when I start coaching with people, but I always say jiu-jitsu is the mirror. You know what I mean? And so they'll say something they don't like that they're experiencing in jiu-jitsu. And I said, well, jiu-jitsu is showing you that about yourself. That's the mirror. That's the thing that's coming up. It's like you might be taking it on your teammate or me or whoever it is in the room, but it's jiu-jitsu showing you that about yourself. And it's up to you to to speak about it, and then we can work through it or whatever it is and talk about whatever the pitfall you're starting to experience. Because I think that's a very common thing that people experience early on in jiu-jitsu, especially with ego death, right? Because there's this sensation of ego death, especially with new people that come into the room that they're not used to. I think it's like when we started doing combat sports, that was a very common thing. You go into a room, you get smashed your first day, and a bunch of guys smash you, and it breaks your ego down, right? So you experience a sense of ego death, and then you're supposed to build yourself back up. Like modern training room isn't as receptive to that. You know, it's not as good for business.
Yeah.
So we try to ease people into that process, but it still comes out of this as part of the experience of martial arts. It's one of the beauties of martial arts. It's a very grounding thing to feel your ego dissolve, and all of a sudden you're not this big important person in your own mind anymore, and it's very grounding in a sense, you know. And I think it's very healthy for people. But yeah, I think that's a big part of that process of that mirror that you kind of feel early on, you know?
Yeah, and you know, the mirror is and can always be there, like in jiu-jitsu and life, period, right? The feedback that I'm getting is the mirror.
Yes.
Right? So it's basically, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what my intention is. This is what's working and what's not working. That's the feedback that I got. That's a mirror.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm present and sensitive enough to perceive what's happening and actually have myself in question, there's endless opportunities to have a mirror reflecting back to me. People, if I keep good people around me that reflect back to me, okay, this is where I want to go, and this is what's happening, working, not working, and this is where am I in relation to where I'm trying to go.
Right.
I think that's really helpful. I don't think it's just a beginner thing, though, dude. It just, as you're talking, I don't know why I thought of this, but I remember there's this girl that used to visit us at Top Team. She's pretty decent. She was like a purple belt, tough, right?
Yeah.
And she would get smashed by the more wrestling MMA centric grappling, and I remember her having like temper tantrums. That's not jujitsu, right? As if we shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
And I just remember looking at this girl, and just at the time, I held her in a lot of judgment, like just basically thought she was a crazy bitch. But she just had a really poor relationship with the feedback that was coming back to her.
Right.
Right. That what she conceived or what she interpreted as not jujitsu was picking her game apart.
Right.
Right. So she struggled with that.
Right.
You know, just this girl just struggled with that, and rather than take ownership, right, she would extend her frustration and blame.
Right.
Right. So instead of take ownership, she would blame, and she would make herself a victim.
If you could have reached her, what would you have wanted her to understand?
So I think what I would have done instead of making her wrong,
Yeah.
right? You shouldn't think about that. You're being a fucking baby. That's making her wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? And those are my interpretations as well. What I would have done is put her in question, right? What about this do you resist so much? What is it about me using what you call not jujitsu? What is it about that upsets you, or has you react in such a way that takes you out of your cool-headedness, if you will, that takes you out of your presence, that has you blaming me? What do you think's creating that within you?
Do you think it was too physical? Like the people were bringing more strength, more like a physicality to the roles?
I would say, yeah, absolutely. There's physicality, but the idea that jiu-jitsu is going to be this and I've come across a lot of people that feel like this, that when they say I want to be more technical, that it's this slow, flowy. Dude, show me anybody at the top that rolls like that.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, there's flow and there's beauty to it, but man, there's also a lot of power.
Heaps of power.
Right? Like,
yeah.
you start getting into the top practitioners in the world, the best of the best. Yeah, there's strength and speed involved.
Absolutely.
And, like, no one has ever wished they were weaker.
That's very true. Yeah, it's a big misconception about jiu-jitsu because it's part of like the ethos, right? Of jiu-jitsu is that we're supposed to, it's technique over strength, all these things. But if you look, but we're still a sport, and sports revolve around athletes, and we've really made huge strides forward in jiu-jitsu to be more professional as athletes, and with that becomes very athletic, like movers, athletic jiu-jitsu players. So of course they're strong, of course they're fast, and they have good techniques, which is what makes it so amazing.
Yeah.
I think also managing our expectations is massive, right? Because sometimes people think it's like, oh, well, I've been training for 5 years. Why am I not moving like these guys I watch on YouTube and watch compete at these big tournaments and stuff? It's like, well, you're training 3 times a week.
Yeah.
It's like you need to be more realistic about what you're going to get out of this, And I think that's a hard pill for people to swallow sometimes,
There's that too, and then I think there's a lot of training rooms. I want to say it's less so now. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. There's a lot of training rooms that train like bitches.
Yeah.
One of my girls went to a gym and was doing something a little bit more wrestling centric, and the girl stopped her and said, "We don't do that here." And I know this girl, and she wasn't being dangerous.
Yeah.
Was it on the rougher side? Perhaps.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in a jiu-jitsu room that completely shelters you from any type of roughness, I think that your instructor is doing you a disservice. And I think that is usually, this isn't a fact, I think that is usually in the spirit of keeping the room at a certain temperature because it will encourage more business.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Look, most people, you and I talked about this earlier today.
Yeah.
Most people that train martial arts today, right, there's zero barrier for entry other than you have to pay.
Yeah.
Right? There used to be a lot bigger barrier for entry to just train.
Right.
Because it was less about the money.
Yes.
As it's become more about the money, that's literally the only barrier for entry most times now. And so you have people that have almost no capacity for violence and no relationship with violence training martial arts now.
Right.
If you were to start acquainting them with a roughness, right, that's not so polished and calculated, something outside of what they could be comfortable with, you're going to scare a lot of people off.
Yes.
Potentially, right?
I think we saw this. We saw this already. To me, it's a benefit. I'm happy I started jiu-jitsu when I did because I came up in rougher rooms. And what we were talking about earlier is rite of passage, right? I remember the first practice I ever went to. Actually was at Fairtex in San Francisco. Jake Shields, Gilbert Melendez were running the program, and I was going, and they were great. They're really tough guys, but they were young. They were purple belts. They were still fighting. Their hearts weren't in coaching. They were teaching classes to do what they had to do to get by. That was my interpretation of what was going on then. Super grateful for that time and experience with them. But I needed more. I needed a coach. And I remember a friend inviting me to go train with some guys outside the city. And they were like, hey, I know this cop. He's got a group of police officers that train together. It's not their gym. They just rent space. You go in there. If they like you, you can stay. If they don't, you're not going to be welcome back. And he goes, if they ever ask you to take a round off, you don't say no. You stay in. That was my first day of training jiu-jitsu in the gi. So I went in. I trained hard. They asked me second round if I wanted to rest. I said no. I kept going. I was invited back. So I had to prove myself if I wanted to train with those guys. And again, for them, like my first coach, Oliver, like he was, it wasn't about money for him. He was a cop. He got paid, you know, but if he liked you and saw that you were tough, he would coach you, you know, and I'm super grateful for that entry into jiu-jitsu because that's what I needed. You know what I mean? I think if I would have went somewhere a lot softer, it would have been the right place for me, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. I think I'm glad I come from that. I'm glad I come from rooms that embraced violence a little bit more.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't think it's necessarily wrong to make jujitsu for people that wouldn't normally have access to it, right? If it stayed that rough.
Right.
Perhaps we wouldn't have the innovations that we have in the game. Because, dude, a lot of guys that are really good at they're fucking nerds.
Yeah.
You know, and nerds, they do advance the level of technique in the sport.
Yeah.
Right? So we have nerds, we have athletes, we have nerds that become athletes.
Right.
We have all different types of things that are represented in jiu-jitsu, which I think is really cool. I think it's about finding your flavor.
Yes.
I think, and yeah, maybe there's not a right or wrong way to do it. Maybe, you know, for me, wherever I end up and whoever I end up coaching, I'm always going to bring the elements of what I find valuable to martial arts. I think rite of passage is one of those things that when you give money to join a gym, okay, you're paying for the instruction.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the instruction is not just jiu-jitsu, in my opinion. The instruction is there's discipline, right? Discipline is a part of martial arts. Right? Being on time. If you have a job that you're coming from that forces you to be late, communicating that ahead of time so that we manage that expectation, right? And then your on time may be different than somebody else's on time, but we establish that together.
Right.
Right? That's discipline. Cleaning the mats up. Right? Just little basic things like that. Discipline, humility. These things are these are important concepts of martial arts. I know gyms that don't think that the instructor should have the power to enforce any of those things. And, you know, I get why they see that. There's a lot of people that abuse that. There's
Right.
a lot of people that just want to tell people what to do. So that exists as well. And so I can understand why somebody would have a complete departure from all those aspects and just want it to be a sort of a free-for-all. Sort of this, it's like an entitlement fest at some gyms. There's a lot of entitlement, and I don't think I ever will subscribe to that approach. I think that things need to be earned.
Right.
And maybe not even through merit. Sometimes it could just be through effort. Not everybody's going to be good at jiu-jitsu.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
On you know, in a given context of good as opposed to there's competitor and hobbyist. Right. Mm-hmm. Some hobbyists, the best they'll ever be able to do is defend themselves.
Right.
Right. Cool. Right. They may never even compete. Cool. No problem. Right. It's that their reasons might be different for training. Nonetheless, I think, learning how to work hard for things through merit, through effort, through time spent on the mat, consistency, right? If nothing else. I've seen black belts, older black belts, get rewarded to black belt for consistency, and I've heard people have gripes about that where, this guy, who's this guy going to defend himself against? And I don't take such a hard stance on this guy that there's one way that we grade on that. I think I think context is important. And
Absolutely.
I think, if this guy was hoping to compete, that would be perhaps a different story. But if this guy's 60 or 70 years old, I have to look at things just a little bit differently. What does it mean for this guy to earn his black belt?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can't get caught up in comparing ourselves to others too much. And I think as a coach, we really need to look at people individually.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's what is this person doing the best that they can do under these conditions? I've coached guys that are doctors, and they travel with that work on top of that. And it's of course this guy can't commit like the guy in the room has nothing to do and trains twice a day. You know what I mean? I can't put them in the same box. That's not fair to him. But he's still committed despite all the other things going on in his life. He still shows up and goes to practice, Yeah. We have a good friend, Fred. Dude's got a broken neck. He still shows up and comes to jiu-jitsu.
Right.
He's never going to train twice a day every day.
No.
He's just not. But the fact that he shows up and trains with a broken neck is unreal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I was privileged enough to give him his brown belt not too long ago. The guy was a purple belt for
a long time.
10 years. too long, considering.
He's been a purple belt as long as I've known him.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I
Yeah.
met Fred and he was a purple belt,
Yeah.
you know? And that's a prime example of a guy, it's like, he has limitations now, but he still doesn't let that stop him. He still shows up, works hard. And that's because he had the martial art mindset, you know? I think that was the thing he took away from all his experiences up until his injury, you know what I mean? He had this really good experience being a martial artist. And, you know, he gets injured and hurts himself, or gets injured, but he still pushes through and perseveres. Like, to me, that's a martial artist to the T, you know? That's a person you want to honor. Like, I think belts is about honor, right? Anytime I'm giving you, I'm honoring you for what you've been doing. It's a reflection of your hard work. You know, it's a reflection of what you're putting into the practice. You know, your commitment to the practice. That's what it's about. I'm celebrating you. You know?
Yeah. And I think it is interesting. Like, it would be cool, I suppose, if there was a uniform standard of what constitutes what ranking.
Yeah.
But I don't know. In Russia, they give master of sport. I'm not sure if they have a criteria or if that's just completely results oriented or what. I don't know. I think it is because we've made martial arts for everybody. I think I'd have like a few different categories. So like one is just time spent on the mat, and that's generally reserved for older people.
Yeah.
Right. Then there's hobbyist, then there's competitor.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes the hobbyist will compete, but they're not a competitor. They're not a professional competitor. They're not trying to be the best in the world. Right.
Yeah.
A competitor to me is somebody that a goal of yours is to be the best.
Right.
Right. I'm going to grade you on a different curve than hobbyist.
100%.
Right? I'm going to grade both you guys different than some of the older people that are in the room that are here for what I would call life enrichment. Right.
Yeah.
That is a byproduct of martial arts training. Right? Life enrichment. There's so much that can be enriched in our life through doing something that is 99% failure. Even if you're good. Right? So you and I get on the mat today. I'd say 90% of the stuff that we attempt fails.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
We're both pretty good at jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
Spent a lot of time, right? Yet we're sitting there rolling with each other, and 90% at least 90, probably more, % of the actual things that we're attempting are failing.
Yeah.
And then we get one successful thing, and then there's some failure, and then another thing may have some success.
Right.
Right. So think about that. Even if you're good, you're being confronted with failure most of the time.
It's funny because I think when we're rolling, we don't even think of it as failure. It's just movement. You know what I mean? I think we're so past that point now because we've been grappling for so long.
And when I say failure, it's like, okay, if I grab you, like it's establishing a grip.
Yes.
Okay. Do I get the grip?
Yeah.
Okay. If I get the grip, okay, that's a success.
Yeah.
Right. If I don't get the grip, okay, that's a failure. But then there's another opportunity to perhaps get a different grip, perhaps change my position. So there's this constant assessment of what's working and not working.
Right.
Feedback.
Yeah.
Right. We're getting feedback. A lot of the feedback is things that don't work.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. I never thought of it that way, really. But it's like, I think feedback is the main thing to get in tune with there. You got to get that feedback from the other person about what's not working, what's coming together, and it gives you direction. It goes back to finding direction in what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's an advantage of martial arts mindset gives you is like kind of dealing with constant failure. It's just part of the learning process, right? We're supposed to be constantly failing. But I think when we get this deep into the practice, like we don't think twice about the failure.
Yeah, I think the relationship to the failure changes. Okay. So a lot of people in their life, and if you were looking at life stuff, let's say outside of jiu-jitsu, they have something that's meaningful to them.
Yeah.
They go out into their life, they start seeking to create this thing. Maybe they want to start a business, something along those lines. A lot of people stop as soon as it gets hard. They stop at the first failure. Okay. Imagine in jiu-jitsu if we stopped at the first failure.
Oh, we wouldn't have.
Nothing would happen.
Yeah, nothing would happen.
But we don't. I think sometimes because and I think it's the meaning that we attach to that failure. Okay. So in a life situation, starting a business, right? That's where people's identity, the fears around their identity, start to kick in, and that's there's almost like a emergency brake on the nervous system that has people just kind of completely reroute from that point. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, if there's a failure, we know that's not the end of the game.
Right.
And I think it's interesting why in that context people are free to make many mistakes and, for the most part, not take them too seriously.
Right.
But when it comes down to just everyday life, avoiding mistakes like the plague, even though, I don't know, think about it, all the greatest learnings you've ever had in your life, are they not by way of some massive mistake that you've made?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely something that's come up along the way where it's like I could only take it this far and then I had to change. Right? I think that's
Yeah.
very true across the board with life, you know?
Yeah. Where I'm coming from will get me as far as it gets me.
Yeah.
Right. And then I come to the end of the road where coming from this angle is going to get me so far.
Yeah.
And changing angles can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, okay, or gaining a new perspective, seeing things a different way.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's what it is, right? It's like you stay the course, but you just change direction a little bit, you know? I think that's really kind
Change
of the
direction,
trick.
change perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's massive.
Yeah.
What do you think some of your biggest lessons jiu-jitsu taught you?
Well, I think what we're just speaking about is really big, right? So if I can get out of being results oriented for a moment and be a bit more invested in the journey, like changing perspective is the thing that takes, and that's what I'm most fascinated by. I'm not most fascinated by new trick moves.
Right.
I'm most fascinated by a perspective change that takes something simple and makes it infinitely more effective.
Right.
Right. So like the tight waist passing that I've been exploring, that all came off just a perspective change.
Right.
Right. Tinkering around with a training partner, kind of just having fun and playing with some different grips, and discovered this method of tight waist passing that I have not seen prior, and then I just start going down a rabbit hole with it. Right. And it was a change of angle, a change of perspective.
Right.
Had I not been being playful at the time, would I have found that? Probably not, because once I get competitive, right, and overly fixated on winning, I'm generally I lose the sensitivity to explore new things a lot of times. And so because I was being playful at this moment, I was open to discovering something new.
So you think jiu-jitsu taught you how to play better again?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, there's a time and place for it. There's a time where, yeah, we're going to compete and we're going to beat each other up.
Right.
And I'm going to use my best shit on you. Now, that being said, even if I'm doing that, could I add that playful mindset to it where, because flow state is not a stressful state, right? So anytime you've ever seen an athlete in flow state, Michael Jordan, Derek Jeter, some of these great athletes that do something that's seemingly impossible with relative ease, and they just look like they're on automatic. There is no stress that's accompanied with flow state. It's this openness, this perspective where they can see everything.
Right.
Right. That does not come from a state of stress. So we were actually having this conversation as well earlier, that when a person is stressed, field of vision narrows.
Yeah, they get
It's
tunnel vision.
scientifically proven.
Yeah.
Right? Our focus narrows to hone in on a threat. Okay? It's the first thing. If I'm looking at losing as a threat,
Yeah.
okay, what do you think's going to happen? I'm going to look for all the ways I can lose. That's all I'm seeing now.
Right.
Right? Can you see opportunity when all you're looking for is the threats?
Yeah, you're stuck in tunnel vision. You can't see
Dude,
what's going on
now
around
look
you.
at how a lot of people live their lives.
100%.
Right? What am I focused on? If I'm focused on not losing, all I'm going to see is the threats of how I can lose. If all I'm seeing is the threats of how I can lose, I cannot see opportunity.
That's great.
Right? Now,
Yeah.
you can take that out of jiu-jitsu and just apply that to everyday life.
Yeah.
Right? Jiu-jitsu is just, it's so highly concentrated with these different types of these stressors that it does give us a glimpse into a broader spectrum, right? Into the macro as opposed to the micro.
Yeah. Yeah, jiu-jitsu is a super deep practice, as we know. Like, even we were talking earlier just about having a conceptual approach, but it really, again, going back to being a mirror, really kind of shows your approach on like how you learn things and how you look at things and how you process success, failure, all these things really kind of come into perspective pretty quickly. It's very interesting too as a coach how much it shines on the other person too. We can really see how the person operates by how they act in jiu-jitsu, you know? I think that's one of the advantages of our position, you know? We talked about, another thing we talked about earlier is the role a coach takes, not only as a coach, as a mentor, but it's really centered around trust, you know? What are some ways that you feel are important for coaches to establish good trust early on with their students?
Okay. Well, so what do we base trust upon? Is it that I have some knowledge that you may want? Is it that you trust my vision? Right? What are we basing this trust on? What is it that you're looking to trust me with? I think an athlete needs to be clear on that.
Right.
Where do you want to go?
Right.
Okay. Do you need to, if I can, I don't know, support you in getting clear on where you want to go? Yeah, I think it's like, it's the overall presence, energy, and vision of the person that we're going to put that trust in.
What do you do with someone when they don't know? What if they come and they just wander into jiu-jitsu and be like, huh, this looks cool?
Well, I think it's like, okay, I'm not going to kick you out of the room until you get clear on what you like,
Yeah,
you
right.
know? I think you just get to present them with the question.
Yeah.
What do you want to get out of this? What do you want to do with this? You want to gain a little confidence in your body? Okay, that's fine. If that's your goal, that's a noble goal, right? You want to compete? Sometimes I want to gain confidence in my body, and that changes too. I want to compete. Cool. There has to be communication, clear communication.
Right.
There has to be an interest in the instructor to want to do that, or the leader, whoever's leading. This is any context somebody's going to ask somebody to lead them in something. There has to be clear communication.
Yeah, it's just like it's setting up expectations.
Yeah, and I think that's
right
what
away.
often doesn't happen in most rooms.
I agree.
I don't think there is, at least in my experience, there isn't clear communication. It's like you show up for class, and all right, this is the warm up that we do, and you kind of learn the culture. Just, sometimes it's explained roughly, but ultimately you just frequency keeps you coming, and you kind of figure out what the culture is. Very rarely have I experienced the culture clearly communicated.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Even in my experience, especially like in my relationships with my coaches that didn't work out, I think communicating expectations and boundaries was just like not a thing. It just didn't really happen.
I think it's
you know what I
overall
mean?
lacking in jiu-jitsu, period.
Yeah.
I think it just lacks in people, period, right?
Yeah.
So not to paint jiu-jitsu into a corner. I've seen communication, expectations, all that stuff not communicated well.
Yeah.
In every genre of life. I think that happens. People get married. They don't do that. I think that happens at work. People don't do that. It happens all over the place. I think it's a human problem.
Yeah.
I think we are untrained and unskilled in clear communication.
Why do you think that is?
Clear communication requires a certain amount of vulnerability. It requires a certain amount of care. It requires a certain amount of presence. Okay, so if I'm just going through my day and I'm just trying to get my day done and get through this class, there's no intention. My intention is to get through the class.
Right.
Okay. Now, if I slow down a little bit and I broaden my intention, well, what would I actually like to create during this class? Okay, so what life lived without intention is going to look a lot different when we start stacking days, weeks, months, years together, as opposed to life with an intention, with a target, with a focus. They're going to look completely different.
Absolutely.
People that have lives that are fulfilling, I don't think they get there without being intentional about how they spend their time and energy. Right? Athletes that get good are intentional about how they spend their time and energy. Okay. People that just come in and take class, you'll get better through osmosis. Will you get the most out of your training? No. Right? So being intentional. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And being intentional requires clarity. What do I wish to create? There's no right answer to that.
Right.
It's whatever you want to create. Do I want to ensure the most learning is happening as possible? Do I want to build relationships and friendships with the people in the room? Do I want to make sure that I'm not just favoring the strong athletes because it's easy? do I want to make sure that the weakest person in the room gets good at jiu-jitsu? So that I can have the weakest person in this room is actually not very weak at all, right? What does that say about the rest of the room?
Absolutely.
That all takes intention. That's not going to happen on accident.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course. And I think as an athlete, you know this because as a good athlete, you need to have intention set for each practice, you know? I think that was something that was taught to me, but I do it very subconsciously now. And even as a coach, I'll go in and be like, all right, I want to bring this different perspective into my teaching this month or this year or whatever it is. And I'm in the back of my mind making these adjustments, tinkering, playing and stuff where I'm always asking myself what my intentions are and how I can be a better coach. And I think that's something a lifetime of martial arts has taught me. I think that's really interesting because I've done martial arts my whole life. So it's a good perspective shift for me to think about, oh, these people don't have that. They haven't developed that. So this is a place where they can come in and start developing intention into what they're doing. You know, I think that's a really good launching pad for them for something like martial arts, so they can start coming in and showing up in some intention. Yeah. And maybe they do it in other areas of their life, like they're used to doing it with work or art or whatever else how they're used to expressing themselves. But now this is just another way
Sure.
they can do that. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, I think martial arts in general, combat sports in general, because of the energy that gets condensed into these experiences, they offer you a more concentrated view of how you respond to certain stimuli, certain stresses, right? And it's valuable. It's like they're essentially having peak experiences regularly, right? People go to Burning Man or festivals, right, to have a peak experience. It's a concentrated version of life where we're sort of we're stepping outside the context of everyday life and having a heightened experience. I would say having a sparring round is no different.
Right.
It's a heightened experience.
Right.
Your senses are heightened. There's a sense of stress, danger, right? What I would call necessary danger. Like I think it's an important factor for human beings in general. I think for young men even more so, as you know, our culture changes. I see less and less kids playing in the street. I see kids with less autonomy. Like they have play dates. They don't go knock on their neighbor's door.
Right.
So with that, they miss out on a lot of necessary character building danger. Okay, and I think for men in particular, I think this is really important to have elders who guide them safely into different depths of danger.
Absolutely.
Right, and knowing that they're supported as they, kind of test their boundaries a little bit and move into riskier situations. And you know what? Sometimes they might get hurt, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like to think that we're going to get through this life without getting hurt in some way, or that not getting hurt is somehow a sign of success. I think that's no, I think we need to get hurt. I think we need to have these really disappointing times so that we can learn how to handle them. But I think it's really important, and not by ourselves. I think it's important that we learn how to handle these with people around us.
With support.
Yeah, I didn't learn that as a kid.
Right.
I learned that if I fucked up, that I'm going to get in trouble. My parents are going to completely withdraw. Not that there was any love to begin with, but now it's going to be replaced with, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm in trouble, I'm getting yelled at, maybe I'm getting hit, right? That's not acquainting somebody with the healthy idea of taking risk.
Right.
Seeing what you're capable of, testing your capability, right? Creating a relationship with failure.
Absolutely. And, that was something I was really grateful for when I was coaching kids jiu-jitsu. I saw a lot of kids that would go out and compete, and you could see they put their whole heart into competing. They really wanted to impress their coaches and their parents, and they went out and fought their hearts out and lost, and then you'd see them break down after, but they had so much support when they would break down. It helped kind of lift them up, and they would see that it was okay and that people still cared about them and loved them and wanted the best for them. You know what I mean? And especially when we're talking about young men, I think that's such an important part of our masculinity. It's something we really want to kind of be in touch with, and it's a really good thing in a primal way for us to get in touch with that. And you're right, I think future generations are starting to lose that. It's so funny, man. I never thought I'd be so conservative with some of my views, but with some of this stuff, I really think it's important for kids, especially young boys. They need to get in and do combat sports. They need to play sports.
They need to scrape their knees. They need to get a bloody nose. It's okay. I do my best to say this without trying to sound like people are wrong for this, but the guys, and I live in Southern California. I live in a neighborhood called North Park, right? It's a real hipster neighborhood.
Yeah.
I love the arts. I love creative stuff. Like, it's a big part of who I am. I also see I also see how soft these guys are.
Yeah.
Right. And really what I experience, but I don't know this is a fact, right? But what I experience from these men is there's no groundedness to them at all. There's no relationship with their own, I don't want to say mortality or death, or that they can handle danger, that if things got hard, that they would be trustworthy, right? They have a fragility to them.
Right.
And it's like, okay. I just, purely based off energetics, I would not trust you if things got hard.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And that's all.
Yeah.
Right? I don't feel like you could stay grounded if things got hard. And I just, in my circle, I'll be happy to support people into growing stronger. There's nothing wrong with strength. Like, strength, as my friend Justin puts this brilliantly, shout out to Justin Garcia, he's a great guy. He looks at strength as the analogy of being on a ladder, reaching for the next rung. It doesn't matter where you are on the ladder, right? You're just reaching for the next rung. It's the decision and the choice to reach for the next rung.
That's a great analogy.
Right? As to not be fragile, as to not let life dictate what you can and can't do, right? The strength is the ability to endure, right, a certain amount of stress, pressure, weight. Why was that a bad thing?
Right.
Right. It's not might, so I don't want to confuse it with might.
How would you define might?
Might is I can take what I want from you by force. Might is force. Right. And oftentimes strength, using force. Yeah, using strength through force.
So you interpret strength more as to endure almost, right?
Yeah, I think the ability to endure hardship.
Yeah.
And that's so important, right? Think about this, and this is something I've been tripping on a lot lately. I believe that human beings gain their meaning in life through their challenges. Yet, we spend most of our life trying to insulate ourselves from challenge. Okay. I have clients that are wealthy men. And a lot of the problems that they've created is because they've insulated their life from so much challenge, they've lost a lot of their meaning.
Interesting.
Right? Because once I've got this much money and I can pay everybody to do everything for me, I'll be okay. Makes sense. I could understand that.
Right.
Right? The life of convenience. Right? It's what John Wineland calls seeking comfort over depth. Whenever I'm seeking to make my life comfortable, and that's my primary objective, as opposed to furthering my own depth, I suffer. Invariably, I suffer. I also suffer going into my own depth, but it feels more meaningful. Right? No, neither is right or wrong, but I seem to like the experience of, if I'm going to suffer, I want to suffer meaningfully.
Absolutely.
I want to suffer while I'm getting to know myself better, while I'm pushing my boundaries, my capabilities, my ability to expand into more things.
That strikes home for me. Like, one of my favorite mantras is, we choose how we suffer. I go back to it a lot. Like, anytime I'm struggling with something or I made a decision and then I feel the pain of the decision that I made, it's like, I'm like, well, you asked for this. This is exactly what you seeked. You know what I mean? And I'm a big believer also that life moves in seasons. So there's times you're up and there's times you're down.
100%.
And how you endure those times when you're down make the times where you're up feel a lot different, And not to take them for granted. I think I made a mistake of taking the good times for granted sometimes, and then things would get hard, and then they seem so much heavier. I allowed them to feel heavier than they needed to be,
Yeah, I think what I've very recently just come upon is that it's, for me, there's going to be times where it feels up or down, and that's based off my judgment of what's good and what's bad. If I can let that go and be present to the gift that each season brings, the suffering tends to dissipate.
Yes.
The suffering is that I'm resisting this as if I want it to be another way. Okay, so I coach men in high performance mindset, right? So that's my job. Okay, I coach people in how to have it all, how to have relationships and you know, run your business and make millions. And recently I haven't felt inspired to create. I haven't felt inspired to meditate. And so for a couple of weeks, I just let myself be in that. Now, I coach people out of that for a living.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of making myself wrong. And I said, you know what? For whatever reason, I don't feel inspired to step on the gas right now. I'm just going to see what happens. This feels like a season.
Right.
It feels like there's some change on the horizon. It feels like there's a shedding of skin that's going to grow into something new. I don't feel like it's time to force anything. Right? This is me being very present to this discomfort inside that wants to just go, be performing, be going, right? My life has been a constant expansion phase for the past 5 or 6 years. I have not stopped growing.
Right.
And then I come to this place where I don't want to do any of these things anymore. I don't want to get up and meditate, and journal, and do all that stuff. And I let it. And it was really uncomfortable because wasn't super clear on what I wanted, right? I didn't have a place to funnel my energy, and so my energy is being squandered.
Right.
Right. And I'm mindfully doing this now. This isn't happening.
It's through observation.
Yeah. It's not unconsciously happening.
Yeah.
Right. I've lived in this space unconsciously.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm consciously just watching this thing go on. And as I got conscious about it and almost like I'm just letting myself, it's like, oh, maybe it's time for me to just slow down. Like winter has to happen.
Yeah.
If the leaves don't drop and fall.
Yeah.
Right, and completely drop by winter, what fertilizes the soil in spring where it's time for things to grow again? Right? And I really believe human beings are like that. I believe that the infinite growth model of most businesses is not human. I think it's cancerous. Cancer has an infinite growth model.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. When I watch people stuck in that, I look at them as like a cancer cell. It's not right or wrong. I just don't think it's natural.
Yeah.
I don't think it falls in line with what we're actually meant to be doing here. I think, like, I posted this the other day. This guy was talking about his high productive morning. He's up at 4:00 and listening to an audio book for 20 minutes. And then he's doing this meditation routine with his wife on the treadmill, just stuffing. And I'm like, how I look at that, I mean, if that's what he wants to do, great. What I notice in guys that have to optimize everything is that when they can't optimize things, they fall apart, right? There's no flexibility.
Right.
Okay. So anything that stays rigid for too long, and we know this in jiu-jitsu,
Yep.
you can't just use strength and rigidity.
Right.
Eventually that's going to fail you.
Yes.
Whatever is too strong, too hard, too rigid becomes brittle. Whatever is brittle will eventually break. Now, whatever is too soft will eventually become fragile, right?
Yeah.
And fragile things they get broken too.
Right.
Okay, so there's a balance. And it's not 50-50 cut down the middle. It's a flow.
Yeah, ebbs and flows.
It's being sensitive to what's needed.
Yeah.
Right? So these guys that want to optimize everything, I know them. They're all filled with anxiety all the time.
Do you think it's avoidance?
I think people want a cookie cutter way to just say, all right, I'm going to get everything in place and then life's going to be on cruise control. So I don't have to do anything. I don't have to think anymore.
Right.
Then they're constantly, and I've had this from my experience, whenever I'm in that, I'm constantly looking, is everything optimized? Is everything where it needs to be so I can be on cruise control? And I'm like, dude, look at you. You're the farthest thing from cruise control right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You're literally looking to micromanage everything to make sure it's perfectly optimal.
Yeah.
I think it's bred out of insecurity. At least in my case, it's bred out of insecurity. It's the idea that if everything's not perfect, right, it's wrong. And if it's wrong, something bad's going to happen.
Right.
And the problem with that is I leave no room for surprise.
Right.
And there's got to be both.
Absolutely.
Okay? If I spend my whole life looking to eradicate any sense of surprise, right, any uncertainty, there's going to be no surprise. There's going to be no adventure. If I get my life to look completely predictable, your life's going to be boring.
Yeah.
And you're going to crave adventure. And you're like, where's all the adventure in my life? Well, motherfucker, you've done everything you can to not have any adventure in your life by removing all uncertainty. Adventure and excitement come from uncertainty. They don't come from knowing the answer. Are you excited about the present? You already know that's what's in the box, right? What's the excitement? The excitement is I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's like examining my relationship with not knowing. and I think human beings in general, I would just, offer that to anybody that's listening.
Right.
Look at your relationship with not knowing.
Mm.
Does that, dude, there's certain things I want to know. I want to know I have enough money to live.
Right.
I want to know that I have enough money that I don't have to worry about it for months and years on end.
Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't work like that, dude. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's like, you could do that if you want. Watch what comes with that.
Right.
Do I want the anxiety that comes with that?
Mm. Yeah, I think this goes back to intention almost. We got to be really careful. Like, to me, I view this as karma. Karma is getting what you ask for.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I'm really careful with this because I've asked for a lot of things, and then when I got it, I didn't want it.
And that's okay too.
Yeah.
That's okay too. So here's the other thing. It's okay for me to get things I don't want.
Yeah.
I don't have to protect myself from that either.
Right.
Because guess what? At any moment in time, I can use getting what I don't want to learn, that doesn't work. Right? 100%. Let me try something different. Now it's time for perspective change.
Yep.
That could maybe bring me closer to what I do want. And man, it's and
that's success, man. That's success in a
stepping
nutshell,
out of the right and wrong of life.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of a right and wrong way to do things. And maybe in the way that I'm talking about some of the things that where you can hear a sense of frustration, there's a sense that I'm making it wrong. I think it's more of a sense of working and not working.
Mm.
Right? Do you like the results that you're getting? Okay, I'm sure you like feeling secure and like you've got it all together. Is it possible that all the anxiety that you experience on top of that is the price tag? Are you willing to give up the certainty to get rid of the anxiety?
Right.
Or to have the excitement?
Right.
Right? To be present to life as it's unfolding as opposed to wanting to have a clear roadmap of everything and how it's going to go from here on end. Show me anybody that's started with a business plan. Okay?
Yeah.
And find me one guy that the business plan went from front to back and he had everything figured out in every step and there was no hitches.
Yeah.
Right? That he didn't have to once pivot and make something else happen.
Right.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, me either.
Not in the simplest business plans.
Right.
There's been adaptation necessary.
Right.
And in order I have to be present. Okay, this didn't work, or this is what's coming up. Oh, I didn't foresee this.
Yeah.
This is what's here now. This is what I have to deal with.
Right.
This is what's here for me to take care of.
Yeah, this is great perspective. And I think you're right. And I think what you're doing is because I think a lot of people get complacent. And I think that complacency kind of slowly, it's like a slow death. Almost, you know what I mean? Like, I know for myself, like one of the things, like you were talking about optimizing performance and stuff like that. When I'm also big on optimizing performance with myself, but for me, all that stuff, all those daily rituals, all those daily routines are things to get me to climb higher. You know what I mean? And that's how I try to look at it, because I know with myself, I'm prone to depression, and depression will move in and out of my life, where sometimes I don't realize how depressed I am, and then it'll be like a long state. I'm like, oh, I can see all the signs of depression in my life. I'm doing, like, maybe I slipped on some of my rituals and now I'm paying the price for it. You know what I mean? So I'm like, all right, you know what to do to get out of this. Start doing the work again. And then I get them back on the work, and then I see everything start to improve again. So for me, it's like a constant thing that I need to go back through again and again and make sure, like, are you doing the work to not be complacent? Because when I'm complacent, I suffer. You know what I mean? And it's like, again, that goes back to what we're talking about. We choose how we suffer. It's either I can be complacent and pay the price, which will lead to depression for me, or I can continuously try to climb and work harder, and then my life improves,
Absolutely.
It's more work, but I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's work to not do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there'll be a different type of work to not do it. And then, the other day, when I was talking about just being in this sort of aimless state for a little bit, there's been a lot of travel going on. There's just been a lot of shifting and changing, and I felt like this massive change come on the horizon as I'm moving into taking a month just to travel, with my wife. And I decided the other day, I'm just sitting, my friend offered me his pool villa for the week. So sitting in this very nice house, and I'm just like, you know what? I feel I'm just very clear on what's happening without this energy. Even though it's going to be hard for me to stop this momentum of wandering, we're going to meditate, we're going to journal this morning. Not as if there's something wrong with me if I don't, but as an act of self-care. Right? And I think that's what if optimizing is coming out of a place of self-care, I think it's great. once it's coming from a place of scarcity, that's where, and I think most people in my experience that I see that are really big on the optimization train, I notice a sense of scarcity. If they were for some reason not to have access to optimizing, they fucking crumble. They get anxious. They're looking, they're clawing. They lose their sense of direction. So it's like, okay, I will, you know, engage in this self-care, these practices that bring the best me into the world, because that's just what feels good. That's where I can create my best from, but not be so attached to it that I fall apart if for some reason things have to shift or adapt.
Right.
I think that's a good distinction to make and how I look at that.
Yeah, I think that's good. And you want that flexibility too.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want it to be where it becomes like a crutch for you to live your life. You know what I mean? It's like it's a tool that you know it's there when you need it. And you know it should be part of your practice, but yeah, again, it shouldn't dictate every single
Structure
day.
is necessary, right?
Yeah.
So structure is what we use to funnel that creative energy. Now, if the structure is too rigid, it will eventually break.
Yeah.
Right? When they build buildings, they build them with actually a certain amount of flexibility within that structure, because if they're too rigid, that steel is going to snap. Right? If there's an earthquake and you don't have some flex in that thing, and everything's rigid and the ground's shaking underneath it, that building's going to crumble.
Right.
Right? So yeah, there's a structure there.
Yeah.
But the structure does actually have some give to it.
Yeah.
And that give is important. The ability to have that give is important. I think this unwavering, this has to be no matter what. There's a certain presence that gets lost in that. Maybe there's a time where that's not appropriate. Maybe there's a time where that's actually not in my best interest.
Right.
Maybe there's a time where I need to not be so structured for a little bit, and it'll actually serve me. And if my highest growth is what I'm concerned with, maybe that'll facilitate that in some way.
Right.
It doesn't always have to be about this just fucking
This is the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that you talked about like taking that step back. And I think that's also a way for you to like recalibrate to see if the system is working that you're putting together for yourself. You know, it's like, if this is the system I'm using to run my life, what happens when it goes away? And then you really see it's like, well, now I'm more anxious. I'm more anxiety and more depressed. I'm not as productive. Like all these things start to kind of fall away and be like, all right, I really needed those things.
Yeah,
it's like proving that they work.
So and here's what I noticed, right? And I've been noticing this a lot. Guys my age, I'm 42. So guys that are around my age, late 30s, 40s, lives are somewhat established, wife, decent job, career, etc.
Yeah.
Once the vision goes out the window of like, what do I want to create? And they're just kind of on the autopilot of survival. I notice the focus of these guys is in complete avoidance. They don't have anything meaningful to spend their energy on, and so they spend it on distraction. Right? So I noticed in the absence of my vision and structure, a lot of my energy was just distracted and seeking distraction from the uneasiness of just not being clear.
Right.
Right. And so, okay, that's a good notice, because this is what happens when if I spend too much time unclear and without a vision, without something that I'm looking to grow towards. I think it's really important to have vision. Yeah. And sometimes there's some pains in getting to it, and that's okay.
What are some of those pains you feel like people hold back from seeing the vision of where they want to go?
Well, I think when I have a vision, I think what stops a lot of people from really exploring their vision is their limiting beliefs on what kind of sacrifices, the hard things that they would have to do to get there. Okay. The inadequacies within themselves that they would have to face to move through that.
Right.
Right. So the difference between, like, it's not so much what do I have to do to get from here to there, it's who do I have to become.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Yeah.
I may not be able to do the things with who I am right now. I maybe have to become something else.
Right.
Become a different version of myself to be able to be capable to do these things, to move forward.
Right.
That's fucking painful. Changing identities is painful. And when I say changing identities, it's not to create like a false character. It's to grow into an expanded character.
Right.
It's really uncomfortable.
Explain the difference between the two.
Okay, so a false character is put on.
It's a mask.
It's a mask,
Yeah.
right? This expanded character is okay, in order for my relationship with my wife to continue to grow in a way that's meaningful, I had to depart from the Peter Pan syndrome, the fear of being committed to a person, losing my exit strategy whenever anything got difficult. I had to acquire the skills, the knowledge, heal some things in order to be able to do that. That was not comfortable.
Right.
In fact, that was terrifying some of the time.
Yeah.
Right? Some really core survival patterns start to kick up because it's always been easier for me to just have my fun and be off in the wind.
Right.
Unwilling to commit to somebody, to devote myself to somebody when things get hard, to be with them in the hard stuff as opposed to come talk to me when you're not crazy anymore. There's, I understand why men have that relationship strategy because they don't want to have to confront the things that are uncomfortable in them when their partner is uncomfortable. Look, if you're listening, you can take your own experience. Ultimately, I want to provide a sense of ease for my woman where she can soften into her full feminine form and just be this loving creature and then when she's loving, it's feeding me with the love that's coming from her.
Right.
When I see that not happening, in some sense, do I not interpret a failure on my part? Okay.
That's personal responsibility on your side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's you taking ownership in the relationship.
Okay, so am I responsible for her mood change? Maybe, maybe not. Or is this just a reflection of her not trusting me and my lack of vision and where I've been falling short as a man? Right? Okay, I got to reflect on that.
Yeah.
Right? When your woman is going through difficult emotions, can you be with her in those difficulties or do you get reactive and make her wrong? Do you leave? Do you shut down? Do you not speak up to what you want because you don't want to have a confrontation? Right? Those are all who I have to become.
Yeah.
I may start off as the guy that is incapable of handling these things in a mature manner, in a productive manner. I may be the guy that shuts down. I may be the guy that avoids. Is that what I want? Or do I have to become the guy that can go through the storm with my partner?
Right.
In the business, in raising kids, if that's a thing that you do, through the jiu-jitsu process. Can I become the guy that can handle defeat and make me stronger? Can I become the guy that can take feedback? I don't snap my fingers and it happens.
Yeah.
There's a painful shedding that leads me to be able to do that.
Right.
In everything that I do in life.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
100%. And I think that's something I know through my own personal relationships and dating and stuff too. For a long time, I wasn't comfortable being vulnerable, where if I didn't like how something was going or I wasn't comfortable expressing my feelings, it didn't really help them express how they were feeling back, And as I've gotten older, I've been a lot more receptive to just trying to understand how they're feeling in that moment, And sometimes it's just a feeling and it just needs to pass and then everything's cool. Not putting so much, just kind of letting it be, it is what it is for that moment and just letting it pass and then it's good. You know what I mean? Putting too much weight on that feeling that day and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, that's the biggest game changer I think in the world for most guys is my woman's mood. All she might need for me to do is be present and love her through the mood.
Yeah.
The minute her mood shifts and rattles me, she doesn't feel safe. That I'm not steady.
Right.
Right? And that's what I was talking about, these guys that are unsteady.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Does she feel safe during her storms, right? That I'm rock solid.
Right.
That's that grounded
masculinity in a
yeah,
nutshell,
that's masculinity
right?
in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I can handle this with you.
Yeah.
And I still love you and everything.
And I don't need you to be any different than you are right now.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's times I got to check her. That's unacceptable. You can't talk to me like that.
Yeah. And that's boundaries.
And that's boundaries. And she respects that.
Yeah.
When I don't do that, she won't respect me. I can't tell you, my wife tells me, she doesn't tell me at the time because she don't like it at the time.
Yeah.
Afterward, she gets actually turned on after the fact. That,
right.
I was willing to do what's uncomfortable and check her.
Yes.
All right. It's like, no, you will not speak to me like that.
Yeah.
Whatever we got to do to work through this is fine. If you need to process, that's cool. I love you, but you can't direct that energy to me like that. I'm not going to put up with that.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest ways. I made that mistake when I was younger. Sometimes the way my partners would talk to me, I would just let it happen. You know what I mean? I didn't acknowledge it.
Right.
And
Or react.
or react to it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm someone, because especially I use depression as a coping mechanism, that if I go into that depressed state, you won't get a reaction out of me for anything. So I'm almost stoic in it, but then I'm not setting boundaries, you know? So now I'm so much better at setting my boundaries and holding those boundaries. I think a lot of people nowadays will express their boundaries and then their partner runs over it right away. And it's like, well, now you're not holding your ground. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And you got to be willing to kind of walk away if they don't respect your boundaries, because my
100%.
self-care is so important to me. Like, again, it's like getting what I ask for. It's like, maybe you're a really beautiful woman. I'm super attracted to you, but I'm not willing to give up the power of my own self-care to be with you. You know what I mean? And I've made that mistake before. I think most people have at some point.
Yeah, I think at most point in time, I think a lot of us have experienced that. And it's something that, I mean, that's a valuable lesson to learn, man. I think that's a really great, I don't know if it's skill is the right word, but just, to have that experience and awareness and knowing and to value within yourself what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And as fantastic as you are, I just won't tolerate that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, dude, there's nothing. I mean, women, ask yourself, is there anything more attractive to you than a guy that will, that knows his value?
Right.
And he's unwilling to compromise that.
Right.
He'll meet you wherever you're at, just not going to put up with certain trespasses or certain disrespects or going beyond his boundaries.
Well, then when you become a low value man, and they're not going to respect you, right? It's like, I think a big part of any relationship, especially us being martial artists too, is built around respect. Respect's very important to us. If you don't feel respected, you're not going to get the best version of me, you know? Yeah. And I think that's all super healthy stuff. Like, we need to set our boundaries. We need to set our expectations. Mm-hmm. And it's like the constant check-in with that is another part of it too. It's like, we set these boundaries, but they keep getting crossed. Well, this isn't working. You know what I mean? And we got to sit down.
Yeah, there's something in the dynamic of the relationship that's not working then.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think all that stuff's great. As I've gotten older, I feel like I've gotten a lot better without myself. Even in my friendships, I think friendships are the same.
Relationships, period, yeah.
It's just relationships, right? And like, we talked about this too. Building a healthy team dynamic, I think this is really important too, is getting the perspectives of others. Having like a strong support group around us, I think is super, super important to grow and kind of maintain your, like, staying true to yourself in a sense, you know what I mean? Like, you can always kind of like weigh your decisions, like, yeah, I'm trying to do this a certain way, but am I really doing the right thing here? And you kind of need to have the support group around you that can be honest with you as well.
Yeah. I think that's so valuable. It's like to question ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's like a weird paradox. It's great to be sure of myself.
Yeah.
And it's also great to question myself.
Yeah.
I think both are necessary. And what I think where confidence starts to come from is that I'm sure enough to take action and okay enough to hold myself in question. Well, did I make the right decision? Well, we'll see.
Right.
Right. And then the confidence that I'll take the feedback and move towards what I'll honestly assess what's working and not working.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I'm huge on that myself. It's actually a big part of just my personality already. I love playing devil's advocate. Like, people that know me best, I'll always just question something that you want to do, even though I don't really believe in that stance. I just want to hear both sides and see the
valuable.
perspective. It's
valuable, man. I used to avoid people like that. Like, why are you bringing this negativity? And it's like, it's not necessarily negativity.
Yeah.
It can be. There are people that are just want to bring the negative into it.
Yeah, and shut things down.
They want to bring their limiting beliefs into it. But I think there is a difference, though, of just having to explain yourself.
Yeah.
Right? This is my thought process.
Yeah.
That's important to sound out your thought process.
Right.
Oh, well, I haven't really thought about that. Thank you for bringing that up.
And especially if you're like, you sometimes have unhealthy narratives in your head.
Yeah.
I think that's another big, we talked a little bit about this also. Like, if you're not if you kind of hone in on the wrong narrative in your head, it can lead you in a bad direction. So sometimes it's nice to have support where you can go with people and talk to about that, you know?
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on narratives?
Well, yeah, I think our life is built up of our narrative. I think each and every one of us, our life experience is based off of the narratives that we run in our head.
Right.
Some of them give us results that we like. Some of them give us results that we don't like. And none of it is right or wrong. Like it's purely for me to examine. Do I like what this is creating? And then I just get to go investigate. Like, what is my narrative?
Right.
What is the programming that I run off of that makes me make this decision over and over again? Like people with trust issues, right? People that the first sign of like they perceive a trespass in trust and they just cut you out of their life forever. That's not a sign of health, in my opinion.
Right.
You can't have relationships if your relationships, people have to be perfect. That's an unrealistic expectation.
Right.
Relationships are built off repair. If we can't repair, look, I'm a human being. Do not put me on a pedestal.
Right.
My ego likes to be put on a pedestal. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. But please don't put me on a pedestal, because at some point in time, because I'm human, I am going to fail you and I'm going to let you down.
Right.
Right? Even if I mean not to.
Right.
Even if I try my hardest, I'm human. I'm fallible. And I believe that's true for every human on the planet. Right? We are human. We are filled with errors, and we will get it wrong from time to time. Now, so the narrative for people like that is what? That they're unwilling to put themselves in danger. They're unwilling to repair. They could be self-righteous, right? They could get a certain comfort from making people wrong. These are all narratives that they'd have to explore. And then, wow, man, I have all these fallouts. What's the commonality here with all these fallouts? I'm not going to say that I haven't had fallouts in my life. There's not a single fallout that I have in my life that I'm not unwilling to amend or talk to that person about.
Right.
Not one.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody that I'm like, they're dead to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, that's just not, I trust myself enough that I can handle any hurt that may come from that.
Right.
I think people that cut people off, they don't trust themselves to be able to handle the hurt that comes from being disappointed.
Interesting.
That's my experience.
Yeah. That's an awesome perspective, actually.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a reflection of their own ability not to be able to manage the pain that they experienced, right?
It's about, oftentimes when you look around trust, it's what the person's protecting within themselves. Right? They're often protecting a fragility within themselves.
So do you think that's wrong of them to protect that?
I don't think it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's not wrong.
It's not right or wrong.
It's not right or wrong.
Right?
It's do you like the result of this? Do you like the result of having a fucking trail of bodies behind you, that people that are dead to you, that you can't be in the same room with, that you won't have a conversation with?
Right.
It's up to you. If you're okay with that, then I mean, who am I to tell you not to do that?
Yeah.
But if you're not okay with it, which I don't think people are,
Yeah.
right? I think we get to a point where like, man, I don't have close relationships because I don't let people be fallible.
Right.
Dude, I'd never want to be in a relationship where I have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Or feel like I have to be perfect. That you ever interact with somebody that you feel like almost like you have to perform because they're so fucking
on edge, and there's a discomfort in like their expectations of what you need to do to keep them comfortable. Yeah, I use the expression walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
I have to walk on eggshells around this person.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah. No, dude, do you?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna tell you not to do that. That's not for me.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's so unreasonable to me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want people to feel like that with me.
Yeah, of course.
And I would feel bad, and if I got that feedback, I'd have to take a look at that.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that's great perspective. Yeah, and it's just like, again, it's that energy that you now bring into the room when you're around those people and you feel like they have to do that. It's like that's not an environment you ever want to create.
No, dude, no, man. I want people to feel empowered.
Yeah.
That's my, and And so, yeah, it's good for me to have that feedback when people don't feel empowered. And some of that might be their story, and some of it might be energy that I'm putting out there. I've gotten feedback from people in trainings where my sureness of myself brought up their own inadequacies within them.
Your self-confidence.
Mm-hmm. I didn't take that as bad feedback. It was just feedback.
Right.
Right? That's
Yeah.
their relationship. Now, if I want to take it further, right? Okay, what could I do to empower these people?
Right.
Right? And so that's a question I get to ask myself. Am I wrong for any of that? No.
Right.
Right? But if I want to expand my ability to reach people, if they had that reaction to me, it's not my fault. I'm not wrong. That's their reaction. They're totally responsible for that.
Right.
What could I do to reach this person to support them in feeling empowered? Not because I need to, not because I'm uncomfortable that they don't feel that way, but
Right.
if my aim is to serve, then that might be a good question to be in.
Absolutely. So how do you find a more sense of empathy for those people then if they're intimidated by your self-confidence?
Well, the first thing is noticing my choice to take that personal or not.
Yeah. Yeah, because it has nothing to do with you.
Noticing whether I want to make them wrong for that. If I feel attacked from that.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm responsible for that. What do I do with that? That's real simple.
Yeah.
That's just taking responsibility for my reaction.
Right.
And where do I want to go from here?
Right.
Right. That's again what my vision is for and my intention is for my dealings with people.
Right.
Right. Do I want to be the guy that people are scared of? No. And in some cases that's true. People are scared or intimidated for whatever reason. I don't look like the most approachable person in the world, so I could see maybe they have a hard time getting past that, and I'm also responsible for that. That's the energy that I'm emitting.
Right.
So I get to take a look at that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Huh.
Yeah. That's great, Eric. Okay, there's a couple questions. A couple questions I want to do to kind of wrap things up.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you, it's usually just one, but I'm going to break it up into two. What are your most important daily rituals?
Okay. So for me, meditation, movement, journaling. Those are three really, really important ones for me. Getting still, like lately my meditation has been this, and this, I don't know, maybe this is some hippie shit, but I started to look at all the ways that my mind looks to tell me I have to do certain things in order to experience love or peace, right? And so my higher knowing is that love and peace are there no matter what. I put barriers in the way of me being able to experience that. And so a lot of my meditation is just noticing the barriers, the uneasiness that comes into play that keeps me from experiencing the state of love and peace, which I believe is my natural state.
Right.
I think that I think human beings get lost and we get cut off from that experience. We believe that we're separate from it and that we have to do certain things in order to feel or experience it. I believe it's our natural state. I believe it's just there, and I put things in front of it. And so my meditation is to just experience that and just to be with that and
awesome.
Notice the thoughts that come up from experiencing that. And that tends to get me pretty centered. I have some other forms of meditation that I do, but that's been what I've been working with lately. Journaling for me is I really get a sense of catharsis about writing out my thought processes and almost as if I'm explaining them to myself.
Right.
And it's something I started doing and just publicly posting them, and people seem to dig it. It's kind of how I built my whole coaching business, to be honest, on accident, and just my own inner diggings.
Right.
So I have a little journal, and I sit and I like to write it by hand. And then movement, sometimes I'll do like a 15-20 minute like yoga practice in the morning pretty often.
Yeah.
And that feels good just to move my body around. I think the older I get, the more I value being able to move my body well. And also just like, I think the ability to move the body in certain ways, like it's what I find fascinating is how limited I may be to move certain ways based off my identity. Right? So imagine somebody came in here and asked me and you to move in a way that was sexy. We'd both probably get pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah,
so, right? You see
sure.
how you just started
For
laughing
sure.
right away,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So like that, And like, it's not that you couldn't. It's
Right.
like, I would have a hard time embodying that.
Yeah.
Right. So movement has gotten more interesting to me lately.
Yeah.
Right? I spend my whole day wrapped in a ball, holding and strangling people in these very tight spaces, or
Yeah.
wrestling, and not too much different. Right.
Yeah.
So, and those are all forms of expression that I'm very comfortable with.
Right.
Other forms of expression, it's just fascinating how uncomfortable with it is, and how the mind limits the body from being able to embody or express that.
Yeah.
Whereas my experience on psychedelics is that gets completely removed, and I can move and express myself however I want in that heightened state.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and just not taking my body for granted.
Yeah.
Moving this thing in ways that open things up and have me feeling good. My energy is important to me. I got to go out into the day, and I'm going to talk to lots of people every day, and I'm going to put out a lot of energy into people every day. How I feel is going to affect that.
Right.
So those are like the three big ones that I engage in.
All right. So how about pre-fight rituals? Did you ever have pre-fight rituals when you were
It kind of
fighting?
changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was never one certain ritual, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Nothing that I can think of, to be honest. I know that might be a disappointing answer, but
No, it's
yeah.
all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you meditating back then before you'd fight?
I've been meditating for 20 years.
Yeah.
Over 20 years.
So
yeah.
I think already bringing meditation to the table is pretty huge. So if you're meditating like fight day and stuff like that going in, or setting intention,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
those are all rituals
Yeah.
that fighters
Absolutely.
use to be successful,
Yeah.
you know?
I think, dude, I think meditation, if I can't sit with myself for 20 minutes, doesn't mean, and maybe uncomfortable, maybe not, but think about it. If I can't sit with myself for 20 minutes, what does that say about my relationship with myself? Right?
Yeah.
Could I sit in a room full of money for 20 minutes? I could sit in a massage for 20 minutes. I could sit in a strip club for 20 minutes, right? I
Right.
could do all these things to fill up that space.
Yeah.
What happens when I can't fill up that space?
Yeah.
And I can't just be with that space? That's very telling, in my opinion.
100%.
Right? And so it's not a right or wrong. It's just examine that. What does that tell me? Is I'm not keeping up on my relationship with me. My relationship with me, if I don't have that, I don't have anything.
Absolutely.
I think that's a lot, that my relationship with my mind, seeing how it cuts me off from experiencing love and joy as just a natural state of being, not something that needs to be fucking performed to earn.
Right.
That's why that go, go, go. I think this grind mentality is the worst thing in the world. And it's not that I don't think we need to work hard. I think we do need absolutely to work hard. I think we also need other things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm not with the hustle culture.
Yeah.
Like 24/7, get up at 4 a.m. every day. I mean, if you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that. I like getting up before the sun gets up as well, because I want to enjoy my day. Not so much. And some days I train hard and I need a little extra sleep, and do so with no guilt.
Absolutely. Eric, how do people find you?
Eric the Gentleman on Instagram, super active there. I'll answer people's messages, so people DM me and ask me questions all the time, and I do my best to support them through that. I try to put up useful content. I put up a lot of nonsense humor as well in my stories, but I just try to keep it balanced. My marketing coach aren't always the biggest fan of that stuff, but, but I don't want to just be a fucking,
You want to be yourself.
I don't want to be a meme of myself.
Yeah, for sure. I got you.
Yeah.
Eric, thank you for coming on.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure.
Right on.